Hello and welcome back to Father Time. I'm your host, Chase Green. We also have our host, Matt McBrayer, and we have a guest host with us for this, continuing our season 5, final season of the Father Time podcast. I hope that all are doing well. Today is the 15th of February, not the day we're recording, but the day that this podcast is coming out. So a bonus episode for February since we did not get one in January of this year. Still apologize for that. Right, Matt?
Yeah. But we have valid excuses. So
Exactly.
At least Chase does. I have an embarrassing excuse, but Chase has a valid excuse.
Yeah, the ice hockey accident with the Russians was pretty rough for Matt, but
Yeah, it was.
it happens.
So we'll stick with that.
Yeah, so we're going to continue with our various interviews of men that we know that exemplify various virtues of godly fatherhood. And today we have with us co-hosting Gage Coldwater. Gage, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are y'all today?
Yeah, we're doing
well.
Good, man.
We are thawing out here in southern Oklahoma. What about y'all in North Oklahoma, Matt?
Yeah. It was like, I guess, maybe almost 50 degrees today. So
wow, that's like Hawaii.
Yeah,
compared to what we've been having.
Yeah.
And what about in the Memphis area? How's it looking over there?
Today is the first day of really any thaw, and the roads are pretty good today. They have been horrible for way longer than they should have been, to be honest. But
that's what I hear. My family in Louisiana, they had some really bad ice storms down that way, and took about a week for some of them to get power back.
So yeah, it was pretty rough here. I fortunately was in El Salvador for half the time, so somebody's got to do it. Might as well be me. But
yeah,
I got to miss
out.
Well,
and it's extra annoying for you having lived in Kansas and Oklahoma, where they do technically like to take care of their roads whenever it snows, and then you go to Tennessee and they're like, "What, salt?"
They don't even have a salt truck or a plow in our county. Like they had to call it in from somewhere else.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's definitely Tennessee.
Yep.
Yeah. They think they're south, but they're really not.
So, yeah, that's true.
Kind of how it works here.
Yep. Yeah. So we've got just kind of a series of questions we'd like to ask you, Gage. Just your thoughts on some things and parenting and Bible time, or just different things that we kind of talk about a lot on this podcast. The first one I'd like to start with is I've met your children, Aurora and Pike, and Gage, I'll have to say this. They're some of the most respectful kids that I've ever met, which is definitely a props to you and your wife. How do you accomplish that, Gage, in 5 minutes or less?
Okay, well, I'll give you the very quick shorthand version. We tried to lead by example in that with them. So when our children were little, I think one of the most basic things with respect is learning how to address people and communicate respect appropriately. I know our society, our culture today kind of hates that. I don't know how many times my children have been told, "Don't call me sir, don't call me ma'am." And that's usually where I interject and say, "My kids are going to call you sir and ma'am. Have a good day, sir, ma'am." But we would address them that way when they were children, even though they were children. So if my children came in, maybe it was late at night and they wanted, that last drink of water after bedtime, as all kids do. And they said, "Can I go get a drink?" And we were going to say no. We wouldn't just say no. We would say, "No, sir. No, ma'am." And we tried to lead them in that example so that they understood that, all people are deserving of respect. No matter their age, no matter their demographic. And so we tried to show them that by just doing it. And then we would also demand it of them when they communicated with others, and we would correct them. They, it was never allowed in our home. It just was the standard was, you don't say, nah, kind of grunt to respond. That wasn't accepted. It was, no, you're going to say, "Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir." And do those kind of things. And they kind of just developed it through that naturally. I know that maybe sounds oversimplified, but it really isn't that hard to do if you just make it the standard. And if you do it yourself with them, they don't feel like there's a difference between you and them in doing so, and so they're willing to step up to that plate and do it.
Do you think consistency is key on that?
But as with everything with parenting, it's absolutely consistent. You can't do it one day and not the next, and then do it another day and then hope your children are going to live that out. If you don't demand that and live that every day, you're never going to accomplish your goal. And I could tell you personally, I think the aspect of their lives and being able to address people and deal with people in a way that is appropriate has yielded more benefit for them in their life than maybe almost anything that they have been trained or taught.
Yeah, I've kind of noticed it too. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because it's just so simple. But all of our kids have had a decent vocabulary, and someone asked me with Alethea because she would say something, they'd be like, "Wow, how's she know that word?" And I was just like, "Because I just talk to her. I don't talk to her like a child. I just
That's
talk
right.
to her."
You treat them like adults because that's what they're going to be someday.
Yeah.
I think far too often in our society, even in the church, we have this old country song mindset, let them be little. And that's great and cute and all. But the real fact of life is, the reality is, they're going to grow up to be with adults, dwell with adults, work with adults, and they better know how to address adults. And it's never been acceptable in our home for them to do anything but show respect. Um, and I think it makes a big difference the way you talk to them, the way you explain things to them, the words you use with them. At a very young age, we stopped goo goo and gaga with our kids.
Yeah.
Um, we just knew. I mean, I can tell you the example that always sticks out in my mind is one day we went to our family's home in Oklahoma where they were living at the time, and we were sitting around the table. And my mom loved to play like these thinking games with her grandkids, my kids, and one of them was where they would do these alphabet games. So she would start, she would say A, and somebody would say apple, B, banana, those kind of things. Well, they got to around the table and they were on P, and they were with my daughter, and she was like 6, 7. She had just learned to read, and they said, P, Aurora, what's a word that starts with P? And she said, pharmaceutical. And everybody just kind of looked at her, and some of the people were going, is that not an F? And, like they were
Right.
having a hard time. And they were like, how does she know the word pharmaceutical? And how does she know it started with a P? And we're like, well, I mean, we use big words in our home, and we use the normal vocabulary of adults, and that's what our kids learn. And so
That's
when
so
we've
funny.
taught them words, that's just part of it. So everybody was kind of, freaked out a little bit about the fact that she knew that pharmaceutical started with a P. They probably wanted to know why she knew the word pharmaceutical, but is daddy a drug dealer or what? But
That's
Well,
hilarious.
it's pretty interesting, how that works out. Well, the kids they just absorb everything, and and the second what Chase said is that you've got some good kids. Pike and Aurora both are good kids. There may be people listening to this that don't know your children, but they're almost as fun as their dad. So
they might be
I
a little more fun, I'd say, at this point, in my opinion. But
well,
So
I'm just kind of upset still with Pike for picking me up this past summer and throwing me in the water. So I'm just not. I'm a little salty about that.
you
So
should be, and you should
uh,
show him that.
hey, speaking of lightheartedness for a moment, and then after this question, Matt, you take the rest. Um, how do you flip the switch between? I mean, obviously, respect and things like that are very serious moments of teaching. How do you flip the switch when it is time to kind of be a little more lighthearted and have fun and things like that?
Um, so I think that's a hard one to do, especially when they're little, because learning to read the
yeah,
room is pretty hard for a kid.
Right.
yeah,
And they're going to go through moments where they say the wrong things in the wrong places at the wrong times, and that's certainly going to happen. And that's when you sit them down and you explain why. You don't just get on to them, but you explain why. You show them, here's the situation. You're at a funeral. Don't say this, right? But I think at the same time, they need to be placed. A lot of parents shelter their kids from events where they might not be able to cut loose and be themselves. And I don't know that we're doing our kids any benefit when we do that. I think we do them more good by exposing them to the realities of life, um, and knowing, hey, this is a time, and maybe it's beforehand. You set them down and say, "We're going." Let's use the funeral example again. We're going to this funeral, and you need to know ahead of time. There's going to be, I've been to some funerals where some wild stuff happened. I can remember one time we took the kids to a funeral, and it was in southeastern Oklahoma, and this lady, part of their culture was to wail excessively at the funeral, and this Native American lady climbed into the casket with her dad, and both my kids about came apart, and it was humorous and it was sad all at the same time, because the casket almost fell off of the roller rack that it was on at the graveside when she tried to climb into it, and it had full potential to be hilarious. Let's be honest. And so dad had to exercise restraint in not laughing, but then he had to look down the row of everybody sitting there and give them that eye that said, "Don't you dare smile. We'll talk about this later." Um, and to their credit, they were good. And then, when we got home, yeah, there was a little bit of laughter about the moment.
Yeah.
But they have to be in those situations to learn, hey, this isn't what you do in this situation. And a lot of that is dealt with ahead of time. I do a lot of talking when I do parenting seminars. One of the things we talk about a lot is intentional parenting. And a lot of intentional parenting is talking about a subject before it ever comes up. How are we're going to pre-deal with this, right? So I'm going to pre-decide today what's going to happen tomorrow when this comes up. And some people say that's arrogant, and they're wrong. It's not. It's actually doing what God calls us to do. It's being men,
Yeah.
as fathers. God calls us to be like Joshua, I think, right? Like, as for me and my house, that wasn't arrogant of Joshua to say. It was a statement of his belief, and this is how we're going to live. When God looked at Abraham and said, "I know Abraham, I know his family, I know how he's going to raise his children after him." That wasn't arrogant of God to say that about him. It was the confidence he had because of the attributes that he had exhibited. And I think that's what we need to exhibit to our children, is that, listen, we're going to pre-decide how we're going to interact. And a lot of that's discussing ahead of time these kind of situations. There are going to be situations in life that are serious. There are going to be situations in life that are fun. And teach them it's okay to be fully engaged in both of those kind of situations, and give expectations and hold them accountable to those expectations. That's probably the other biggest part that people fall short in parenting, is not holding themselves or their children accountable. If you say don't do this in this situation and you do nothing about it as a parent, you've actually just reinforced that behavior in that child
Mm-hmm.
and done them a disservice. It's the whole counting thing. I hate counting in parenting. Um,
Yeah.
don't count to your kids. You never tell them, "Okay, I'm going to count to 5 and you better get over here." No, you say, "Get over here." If they don't get over there, you go get your child and physically move them to where you want them to be, and let them learn dad means business, mom means business. Like, this is serious. If mom, how can we expect him to obey God when God says to do something, if we can't get him to obey us when we say something? God never counts. So I think all of those things kind of factor into getting them to learn the situational awareness, read the room kind of idea, and be intentional about it ahead of time.
Yeah. I mean, and I've had the blessing of being able to be around you and your family quite a bit. And so I have seen this, like um, with his, with Gage, as far as watching him parent his kids, and going from the silly to the serious real quick. And Gage, of course, likes to goof off, and but he knows when to be serious too. And when something goes too far, you do get to see it on Gage's face real quick. And so I think that's when the kids go, "All right, oop, done.
Yeah.
We're done."
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That was the line. We just crossed it.
yeah,
Right.
but I'll say this to follow that up. Not that Gage is going to fly off the handle, much to the opposite, I think. At least that's been my thing that I've seen from him. I remember they came to Cerrito, West Virginia, where we were living at the time. And I don't even know if you remember this, but do you remember that I think Pike didn't strap down your garbage can in the back the right way? Do you remember this?
I do not.
Okay, so he didn't strap down the garbage can in the back of your truck the right way, and there was supposed to be like a bungee or something around it so the lid wouldn't fly off, and the lid flew off, and you when you found out, we were all standing there, you found out and you were like, I am so mad at you right now, just about like that. like it wasn't like, a lot of dads would be like, are you, what, you didn't strap it down, and start raising their voice, and you just were like, I'm so mad at you right now. And I was like, I need to be a little bit more like that. Like, I need to be a little bit more chill and getting on to my kids. But
that was probably just a public exhibition on my part. like, because usually I'm not so chill, I promise you. Like, my kids know when the line has been crossed, usually with me. But I'm not, like, chill in anything. Like, if I'm something, I'm not chill. But thank you. I'll take that.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got kind of a little bit of a, this is kind of the nice thing about talking to individuals that we know their families real well. Can you walk us through kind of the, I'll back up. Aurora and Walker have been a thing for quite a while, but there was an interesting dynamic there, and I just would love for you to explain that a little bit, to us, because they were not allowed to date for a while. I don't know, was it till 18 or whatever? And I don't remember what the parameters are. I know what my parameters are, but I don't know what yours were. But anyway, and then they started a relationship, but there were still some stringent parameters there. And then they eventually got married. And so, like, could you kind of walk us through, like, how that happened? I mean, did you pick Walker out here? I don't know how this worked, but anyway, let us know.
Well, so I just want to be biblical, right? So I just sent one of my servants to a far country.
Nice.
Said, go find, one of my kinsmen.
A far country called Memphis, right?
Yeah. So, no, Walker and Aurora met when they were really little. Really little. I've got this picture of them. I don't remember how little they were. I mean, they might have been 3 or 4 when they first met. And they instantly, like, just connected. And then years later, we had an opportunity. We were back in New Orleans where they lived at the time. And of course, instantly, they just kind of struck up a chord again. And we started doing things intentionally with their family for that purpose, giving them opportunities to spend time together. Now, our rules, we've had some pretty simple rules, and I have been accused of having been way too strict on this. You take it or leave it on how you think on that one. I'll leave that up to the crowd to decide, but here's kind of what our rules were. So we didn't let her start dating, if you would, per se, until we felt 100% comfortable with the young man being able to handle dating. So we did not have an age limit on that. It was more of a maturity limit. Now, some other rules that accompanied that this is where people, they fall off the ship real quick. There was no hand holding. So they could be boyfriend and girlfriend. That's fine. There was no hand holding. And people are like, oh, you're suppressing, their desires and making it harder on them. And you can ask them how that worked. I can tell you this. If you never start something, you never have to stop that something. Yeah. And the physical affection aspect of a relationship is really dangerous. And fortunately for my daughter and her future husband, Walker, I had been a red-blooded young man as well. And I know how this works. And I know that if you hold the hands, then eventually that tingly, warm feeling wears off. and then you want to maybe touch their arm, and then you want to touch their leg, or you want to, and that wears off, and then you want to kiss, and then that wears off, and before long, boom, bad things are happening that should have never started. So our goal was, why start something that you're going to have to shut down? So just don't do it. Just don't start down that road. And people think that's crazy. That's okay. It worked really good for them. My daughter and her husband kissed for the first time on their wedding day. Pretty special.
Yeah.
And they never had that physical relationship with anybody else. That was a special thing for them. I think that's powerful. I think that's honorable. Parents are welcome to do it their way. Just because you can let them hold hands, I don't know that you should. Okay.
Yeah.
You can't say it's sinful. No, but is it wise? I just don't know that it is. That's just my opinion on the matter. But, and then, so over time, they started getting to go on some dates. And the way that worked was they went with us, or with some very, very strong-minded Christians, not young people their age. I know how that works. So that wasn't allowed until maturity was proven. And then eventually, Walker came to me and he wanted to be able to take her on a date on his own. So they went, but we were in the restaurant just across there. And they proved, they could behave and do those things, but we didn't try to put them in situations for failure. We wanted them to have situations to succeed. And so we kept promoting that. And then, eventually he came to me, wanted to marry her. And I was very grateful because he had proven himself as a young man that not only respected her, but respected me as her father, and showed that diligently. And it made, I mean, not every kid's going to be like Walker Kane. I can tell you that. And I know that. Exemplary young man. When I grow up, I want to be like Walker, kind of thing, and he made it probably easier on me than it should have been. I didn't have to clean any guns in front of any boys. We did clean some guns because guns are cool, and we like doing that, but it was never to intimidate or scare a boy, So
Right.
he made it pretty awesome. And so did she. And it's, what, it was a great example for my son though. And we've had these discussions, and my son has said, I want that to be how it is for me on my wedding day. And just that example has led him to that kind of a mentality. So
That's a great story. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Just kind of a follow up. What do you think about the folks, and there are many, including in our brotherhood, who would try to deride those thoughts with the idea, oh, that's purity culture. Do you have any thoughts on that?
well, I definitely have thoughts on it. Why wouldn't we want our children to be pure?
Exactly.
If your mind is anywhere else as a parent, you have missed the boat long ago. It went sailing past you.
Yep.
You cannot look at Romans 12. You cannot look at 1 Corinthians 6 and say that God does not want us to live pure lives and live that before our children and teach them to do that too. Our bodies are to be these vessels that are honorable and chosen. Our bodies are meant to glorify Him. I can't think why you would want to put that temptation in front of your kids. You're setting them up. And I see it all the time. And then these parents come to me later and they go, I just don't know what happened to my kid. Yeah. I did. I know. I watched you parent, and I watched the choices that you made and you allowed them to make when they were not prepared for it. And they did, scientifically, I was reading an article just last week about this. Scientifically, your brain does something when you have a sexual attraction that is then put into play by physical touch. It actually takes away, like alcohol does, your ability to have self-control. And they're finding that on a very scientific level. This is not just something that us prude parents have been teaching for years. It is something that's scientifically proven. So if you want to protect your children, you're going to have to actually protect your children. And you're going to have to actually step up to the plate and say, we're going to do something different here. What's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing the same way and expecting different results. Well, look what's happened around us. and everybody's wanting to do what all the world is doing and get a different result from that.
Yeah.
um, Good luck with that. I mean, you're setting your children up for failure and heartache and pain, and those repercussions and consequences last a long time. I don't want my kids to have those kind of things in their life, so we just made different rules about it, and I believe it was very beneficial. Um, but there's all kinds of sections of people even in our brotherhood. You've got the no dating allowed people. You've got the full on dating. I don't care if they're 12, they can go on a date people.
Hmm.
We've tried to just kind of place ourselves not in any of those groups and try to just ask, what does maturity, what does wisdom teach? What's going to be the best thing for my child in the long run in their life? How is
Yeah.
this going to help them grow into the people that God wants them to be? How is this going to help their future marriage? Um, and ask those kind of questions instead of, what is the world teaching us? You know?
Yeah. I think back to like 1 Timothy 5. I use this a lot when talking to young people because like when I was a youth minister, people would ask, well, how far is too far? And I'm like, well, number one, you are asking the wrong question. But when you look at 1 Timothy 5, it tells you how to treat people. You're supposed to treat the older men as fathers, the older women as mothers, and the young women as sisters.
That's right.
And I'm like, I asked, especially guys that have sisters. It's great. Like, would you just sit there and just hold hands with your sister? Because
Well,
I wouldn't.
yeah,
I'm like,
right. I
like,
mean, like
I
at
wouldn't
our
do
house,
that.
the phrase was, you got to leave some room for Jesus,
Yeah,
and you're not giving much room for Jesus right there, right?
yeah,
And and I would tell, you know, I told Walker, one day we were talking about this, and we were very frank about these kind of things. You know, whatever you do to her, I'm going to do to you. And he didn't like that, right? Like nobody likes that thought. And so you
yeah,
kiss her, I would kiss you. You know,
yeah.
and so I mean, maybe that was a little preventative. I don't know, but um,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know we're running kind of out of time a little bit, but I thought we should say hi to Kelly and Aurora. I think got in the back, right? And so, hi, Kelly.
they
Hello.
said
And
hi.
yeah,
Aurora's back
there
here.
we
She's
go.
in the
There's
back, but you can.
Aurora.
We were just talking about you in a good way.
well, man, we appreciate it, man. There's a lot of things that we could really talk about with Gage, um, and I know one thing that I've always looked up to Gage about is that he didn't let things determine what he was going to do just by what the norm is, even to the point that they decided to go overseas as a family and go into the mission field together and live in rough environments as a family, and it's just been awesome. And then of course they came back to the States and they're always traveling together and working together, and I think that's been really nice. Now, so let me ask you this, as we're kind of running out of time, but I want to just briefly talk about working together as a family and what all that means to you and how that's looked in all the
Man,
things you've done.
when I think about like the rearing of our children and how they've turned out, my wife and I have talked about this multiple times. We talked about it with our kids now that they're grown. And one of the most impactful things I think was choosing to do the Lord's work together. And I think you hit it on the head with that. The choice to move to Africa and work there was a family decision. It was something we all sat around and talked about and decided to do. And I think it was probably one of the biggest blessings of our family life. Um, we never chased balls, sports, and all that. I love sports. I still love sports. I love to watch sports. I love to play sports. My kids love to do those kind of things too. But that was never our focus. So we tried to make it our focus was how can we serve God the most and to the best of our ability. And the impact of living in a third world country on our children was dramatic. It grounded them, helped them see that the blessings that they have and the difficulties that other people have. Helped them see that the Lord's work is really important everywhere. That mission work is important. That, I think it gave them a lot of opportunities to grow and develop as their own people that were not shaped by society, culture, or age groups. They were forced to interact that weren't just from.
I think we lost Gage there.
Yeah, maybe so. He's at least frozen.
Yeah.
So.
Wonder if Gage can hear us. Really wanted to hear what he had to say there.
I know. He has a lot of good stuff. I know, right? Now we have to have part 2, I guess. Well, Gage has definitely done a lot of good stuff. I would also like to add in, if he comes back before we wrap this up, then I'll let him say this. But he has been the director of the Manna Project. It is now a work of the Memphis School of Preaching, or rather the Forest Hill congregation. And so he has been doing a good work with that for several years. And just thankful for all that he's done there. Thankful for his good example in being a father, a husband, and just a Christian man. And so just thankful all the way around.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like Gage got kicked out of the studio, probably having some internet issues. So we'll go ahead and wrap up the episode for this time. But I'd be in favor of bringing him back for a part 2, if that's what we want to do. I'd love to hear the rest of that about some of his time in Africa and how that affected his family. And I think that there's a lot of valuable lessons for fatherhood that would go with that. So if we want to do another episode, follow up, maybe another bonus episode, we might see about doing that. But we appreciate everybody for tuning in to this episode of the Father Time Podcast, Season 5, Episode 2, the finale season of Father Time. Don't forget that we might have some more resources coming in coming years. We're still, Matt and I, kind of discussing what we want to do with that. But maybe stay tuned towards the end of this season, and maybe we'll reveal some things there. That's yet to be seen, but we certainly appreciate all of our listeners, and we appreciate the feedback that we get from time to time as well. And we just appreciate everybody for tuning in. There he is. Do you want to give him another chance? Let's see.
I'm sorry, guys. My phone it was at 60%, and then it just turned off. I don't know. So,
well, okay. As you were saying, Gage.
Yeah, we'll let you finish up. You're talking about the mission work and being over there and your kids interacting with other kids.
They had to learn how to deal with people of other cultures, other societies, other mindsets. They had to deal with a lot of different age groups that they probably wouldn't normally deal with in American culture. We love to section our children off only by their age group. And I think that really blessed our kids a lot. We spent a lot of time together, and you kind of mentioned a while ago, Matt, that we travel all the time together, and we did growing up. There was never time really when we weren't together, unless I was on a mission trip where they couldn't go, maybe to a different place that was a little more dangerous or something. And I think that really knit us together as a family, and it kind of warded off a little bit of Satan. I think it allowed us to really keep the focus on the main thing and encourage that with our children. And a lot of the work we did was with Christians, of course, and that was a blessing to our children. Like we'd go spend a week with these weird people in Cerrito, West Virginia, or like wherever we were going, we were spending time with Christians. And I thought that was the biggest blessing for my children and for us, was just that community of Christianity that we had, and they got to see it across not only the United States or our own state, for that matter. Most a lot of people, they say, like, most people don't ever even get out of their own county. They got to circumnavigate the world doing that, and I think that was a huge benefit. I know not everybody has that with their children, but it was a benefit to our family for sure.
Yeah, that's good. Well, man, we've loved having you on here. It's been good talking to you. We were, even while you were off, we're going, maybe we should have a part 2 anyway,
Right.
Let's do it.
But we appreciate you coming on today and wrapping up this episode with us.
Yeah, appreciate you guys. Keep up the good work.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Gage. And appreciate Matt for helping us with some of the questions and, as always, co-hosting this podcast. And Lord willing, we will be back March 1st, and we'll have another guest on the Father Time podcast. And like we said, in Season 5, Episode 1, we plan to have 12 episodes this season. So stay tuned for those, and we appreciate all of our listeners. It's high time for Father Time. Let's all step up as fathers and be the men that our families need us to be.